Good afternoon. This is Dyke Hendrickson, and the podcast is Life Along the Merrimack. This is a weekly podcast we do, and we talk about the health and history of the Merrimack River. Today, one of the things we're going to talk about is the birthday of the Environmental Protection Agency. Now, you probably weren't thinking about that, but the EPA was created 50 years ago in the fall of 1970. Richard Nixon was the president, and there were two senators from New England who worked very hard to pass something called the Clean Water Act. Edmund Muskie was one of them in 1972, a Democrat from Maine. He was the architect of the Clean Water Act. And everyone in town who's a little older will tell you the Clean Water Act saved the Merrimack River. Here you can see a clean river. You can see boats. We know there's recreation there. This is an island in the river. And this is just one of the great success stories of the EPA, that the EPA, starting with the Clean Water Act in 1972, gave many millions of dollars to communities like Newburyport, like Amesbury, Salisbury, everyone up the river to start their sewage treatment plants or make them better. So this is one example of what looks good. Joppa Park in Newburyport was also a beneficiary. It was very dirty down here before 1972. Joppa Park was created in 1971, and many of you have probably driven by it when you're going out to Plum Island. But this is a beautiful municipal park and shows the beauty of the river. Coast Guard vessels are often seen in the Merrimack River. The Coast Guard was founded in Newburyport in 1790. It wasn't called that at the time. It was the Revenue Cutter Service. But the Coast Guard was founded here, and Lyndon Johnson actually made a proclamation about that in 1965. So here are some vessels in Newburyport. That's a 47-footer on the right. That's the Coast Guard headquarters in Newburyport in the rear, and there's about 26 coasties here assigned in Newburyport. Mariners know this. It's Ben Butler's toothpick when they're coming in the river. It's on the Salisbury side. Ben Butler was a governor of Massachusetts. He was a congressman here, and he was a resident in his later years of Newburyport. This is an old photo, excuse me, not an old photo, an old image. This is the Amusement Park in Salisbury Beach. Looks like it's the late 30s or early 40s. And people have been getting rides there, eating fried dough and French fries for many years. And this is one fun photo. And when I say photos and why I use them, I just wrote a book titled Merrimack, the Resilient River. And so I have a lot of different photos, and this is one of them. Here is Salisbury Beach. You know that it is adjacent to the Merrimack River and is one of the most beautiful beaches on the North Shore. And I should mention this is Joppa Radio 96.3, and it's Life Along the Merrimack. We talk about the health and history of the river. This is the bridge that links Newburyport and Amesbury, the Whittier Bridge, built several years ago, close to $300 million. There's much beauty on the Merrimack River. This was taken by Brian Eaton, a longtime photographer for the Daily News in Newburyport. And we do talk about the river getting dirtier. You know, sometimes there's CSOs, they're combined sewage overflows. After heavy rains, we get some discharges of effluent and water, and they come down from Haverhill, Lawrence, Lowell, Manchester, New Hampshire. So the river does get dirty. It does get cleaner, but this is just an example of how beautiful the river can be. Another shot showing the beauty of the river, again by Brian Eaton. This is near Lowell's Boat Shop, showing you, one of the most scenic parts of Amesbury, and certainly a cleaner river than it once was. This is a discussion or kind of a talking about what happened to the Native Americans. And I'll go through it quickly because you might be listening on radio. When Europeans settled in New England in the 1620s, the largest Native American tribal group in the future state of New Hampshire used the flatlands and bends of the Merrimack River in the present Concord, New Hampshire, for its central village. Named Pennacook, which means at the falling bank, they were a branch of the Abenaki. The Pennacook were allied with other tribal groups in the Merrimack watershed and owed allegiance to the Sagamore Piscataway. Once numbering in the thousands, by the 1720s, only a remnant of the group remained in the area. So this is a rather sad element of the Merrimack River. Many Native Americans died of diseases that the settlers brought. Again, there are many beautiful parts of the river. This is clearly where Amesbury and Merrimack meet, and it was a beautiful summer, this one of 2020, and here's a shot of the clean river, once again, thanks to the EPA. Many communities in the Merrimack are making a comeback, and Haverhill is one of them. This is Haverhill. It's new buildings you can see. There's still some beauty and vegetation on the left. Communities of Haverhill, Lawrence, Lowell, up into Manchester, New Hampshire. As I think many know, there were many factories along the river, textile mills, and in the case of Haverhill, many shoe factories. They gave a lot of people jobs in the 19th and early 20th centuries, but those mills greatly polluted the Merrimack River. Those textile mills and shoe factories disappeared in the 40s and 50s, and for many years, these communities had broken down mills and weren't doing so well, but they're doing a lot better now, and this is Haverhill, and it's using the Merrimack River as their key to urban regrowth. Again, this is an example of new structures merging with a very old infrastructure. The old infrastructure on the right is an ancient bridge in Haverhill, and here is some new construction, including apartments and condos on the left, and a branch of UMass Lowell in the center. So a lot's going on in Haverhill. And here is a fellow who is really helpful to the river. His name is Rocky Morrison. He's kind of a freelance cleaner up guy. He takes his vessel along and picks incredible things out of the river, especially up towards Lawrence and Lowell, bicycles or tires or swing sets or shopping carts. He really does a good job. Again, sometimes we talk about the beauty of the Merrimack, but there's still a lot of refuse in the river, and Rocky Morrison has been very helpful. This is a famous statue in Haverhill. It's supposedly the first statue of a woman in the US. That's Hannah Dustin. In 1697, she was involved in a serious altercation with Native Americans. They stole and killed her little 2-week-old baby, kidnapped other people, and they kidnapped her and took her up to southern New Hampshire. She was able to wait till the Native Americans fell asleep. She found a hatchet and she scalped about 10 Indians, the story goes, and then went off and sold their scalps. Now, you have conflicting concepts here. She was a very brave woman, and yet she killed, close to a dozen Native Americans. That still remains a little controversial as the way life goes, but as one mother said to me, well, if she had killed my 2-week-old son, I would have done something dastardly. Here's a picture of Lawrence in the old days. This is the early 20th century. It looks pretty dirty, and this is why I'm using the photo in my book. It looks dirty, so we can appreciate where we have been. This is a beautiful shot in Lawrence. Lawrence has some grim areas, but very beautiful parts also. Out down in the far distances, the Lawrence Boat Club, where they have canoes, small sailboats, kayaks, and in Lawrence, this is a beautiful spot. One of the largest dams in New England is in Lawrence, and this is part of it. Now, even Henry David Thoreau back in 1839 made the comment that, you know, when you put these dams up, it's probably helpful for the textile mills because it creates hydropower, but it's very bad for the fish. And as you can see, it's very difficult for fish who want to go up river and spawn to get past obstacles like this. They do have fish elevators and ways to get them up, but the river did create an end to many types of fish going upstream to spawn. Here in Lawrence as well, some of the old mills here in Lawrence, the river is about 2 to 3 feet. It's deeper in other areas, 15 to 20 feet. But this is mixing the old and the new. The old is the old mills on the right, which some of them are being filled with new companies and new enterprises. And then you have a parking garage coming in on the left of this. Here is one of my heroes of my research, Ellen Swallow Richards. She was the first graduate of MIT, first woman graduate in 1873. And at that time, Lawrence and Lowell and other communities, there were many young people were getting sick, and families that lived near the river were getting sick. They were getting typhoid, among other things. And they got their drinking water from the Merrimack. Now, in those days, you know, the people said, well, we clean it, we purify the Merrimack, the water is fine, but it wasn't fine. And Ellen Richards was one of the first, with other pals from MIT, came up here, improved the way water was purified. And that purification process was used in the Merrimack, but many other rivers in the United States. She was a real leader and a terrific scientist, and as I say, the first woman graduate of MIT. And here is what her research eventually created. This is in Lawrence. It's the Wall Experiment Station. And here water is purified, and also research on water is still done. Lowell, of course, has a big presence on the Merrimack River. This is Lowell. That's UMass Lowell on the right, a dormitory. But you can see how many dams and how many different elements they have to catch the water, use it for hydropower. And a lot of building went on in the old days, I've got to say that. This is Lowell. Lowell, like many communities, has found great benefit to the Merrimack. Here there's a number of avocations being pursued. There's a jogger, there are fishermen, there's women walking their children farther down. So this is, like many communities, Lowell has a nice pathway along the river. And this is in Lowell. The National Park Service gives rides in the summer. It's not doing it now because the COVID is upon us, but they give informed tours about the river, how the river was used for hydropower, how the textile mills worked. And this comes out of the fact that in 1978, Lowell became the first city on the East Coast to have a federal park run by the National Park Service. And so if you've never been to Lowell, to the museum and the park over there, it's a wonderful thing. And here's another shot of Lowell showing yet another part where much of it has been dammed up. They save the water in these dam-like ponds until they need it. And not just for mills, as they used to, but there are many hydropower stations still operating, providing electricity along the Merrimack. And I didn't know this before I started, close to 500,000 people still get their drinking water from the Merrimack. So that's another reason the EPA was good, and we need to keep the river clean. Manchester, New Hampshire had a bad day in 1936. This is the Amoskeag Manufacturing Company, which dominated the city for almost a century, But here, the Merrimack seems to be dominating the community and the mills. There was a great flood in 1936, and not just in Manchester, but all along the Merrimack, and this is one of the most graphic pictures of it. Here's Merrimack, New Hampshire, and I think they've been very successful in making a transition. You can see the mills on the right, and you can see a lot of modern building and economic progress. There are banks, there are motels, hotels. Merrimack is in the foreground, of course, and this is Manchester, and it's known for having done a very good job in rebuilding itself. Again, a dam in Manchester, it provides a great deal of hydropower for electricity. And this is Manchester. Again, you can see early spring, the water is going fast, and if you're taking a kayak, you better have your skills together. This is an interesting shot I took in Nashua, New Hampshire. Again, I just wrote a book called Merrimack, the Resilient River, and I went up and down from Newburyport up to Franklin, New Hampshire, taking photos and writing the history. But this is where the Nashua River meets the Merrimack River in Nashua, New Hampshire. The start of the river is in Franklin, New Hampshire. This Trestle View Park is part of the start of the river. There is no one place, like one sign such as this that says the Merrimack River starts here. It's a little understated in Franklin, New Hampshire. But I went up there. This is part of the start of the river. And I was able to get from one of the town historians the fact that the Winnipesaukee and the Pumacasset rivers merge right behind the high school. Now, I would have had to take out a kayak or, an air balloon to go see it myself. I didn't see the exact part, but assume that this is part of the start of the Merrimack River in Franklin, New Hampshire. Again, Franklin, New Hampshire looks different than it does, say, in Lawrence and Lowell. Very beautiful spot. Here's one of the old mills, and we've seen part of this in Lawrence, and they are redoing. This is in Methuen, pretty spots in every community along the Merrimack. The clock in Lawrence actually was at one time the second largest clock in the world, next to Big Ben in London, just a few feet smaller. And so you can see many of the icons of the old era are still alive in Lawrence along the river. And here's a spot in Lawrence. Some spots in Lawrence are not glorious, but many are. And here's a Canada goose. It appears to be enjoying the day. This is Newburyport again. And I want to stress that the EPA was very valuable in helping communities like Newburyport get back on their feet, clean the water. And I must point out in the background is the marsh, which is crucial to the health of the Merrimack, for wildlife, for birds. It's 25,000 acres. It's the largest one in New England, this wonderful natural marsh. And you can see how many vessels have returned. The EPA was started in 1970, as we said. In 1972, Senator Ed Muskie from Maine was the key leader. And here he is in one of the many, many hearings he had. We don't fully recognize it, but the environmental movement didn't even start till 1970 with the EPA. So when someone like Senator Muskie got out and said, we need clean water, there were many senators and congressmen who didn't fully understand what he was saying. He had 33 hearings around the country, New England, the Atlantic coast, places in the Midwest where there are lakes. I mean, he really worked hard, and the bill passed in 1972 for clean water. Now, President Nixon vetoed it, but I'll get to that in a moment. Here's a little more beauty. Dan Gravek of Plum Island took this, and doesn't the Merrimack look good here? I love this photo. Among other things, of course, this is where the Merrimack meets the Atlantic, and you can see a sandbar on the left. And this sandbar, and sometimes it moves, has confounded navigators for decades, if not centuries, because it's very shallow there. If you're not aware, it's there. You're gonna, in low tide, probably bring your vessel up on this. There's a draw of 12 to 16 feet in low tide, and so you must be very careful. And larger vessels, number one, they stay to the north side, but number two, some vessels won't come in during low tide. They draw more than, say, 16 feet and don't want to try it. Those are jetties that were created with federal funds in, say, 2015, about $20 million, and that was for navigation purposes. They're trying to keep silt out of the river. And here's one of my favorite shots. When I was looking at this, I thought, boy, I haven't seen these guys in a long time. President Nixon on the left, Senator Hubert Humphrey on the center, and our hero for the day, Senator Ed Muskie of Maine. And President Nixon later became a scoundrel for his poor behavior in the Watergate scandal. But in 1970, he gave the okay to the EPA. Now, I must point out that when Muskie was able to get the Clean Water Act passed in 1972, Nixon vetoed it. Yes, that's true. But these Congress passed it over his veto. So the bill of 1972, which I keep talking about, did pass. And it was people like Muskie and Humphrey who made it happen. George Mitchell was a Democrat from Maine. He retired in 1996. He was responsible for keeping Clean Water Act going. In 1987, President Ronald Reagan wanted to get rid of the Clean Water Act and the EPA, but Mitchell and many others compromised. And what Reagan was basically said, I don't want to give grants anymore. You give 90% of the money to the community, and they only have to raise 10%. They had to get rid of the grants, but Mitchell fought for low-cost loans. So communities now, even today, can get low-cost, low-interest loans to improve their facilities. In 2019, the loans are at 1.5%, so that's very low, and communities can still borrow from this fund to improve their sewage facilities. So that was George Mitchell, 1987. He engineered the amendments, sometimes known as the Clean Drinking Water Amendments of 1987. Here's another wonderful shot upriver near southern New Hampshire. And you never know what you're gonna find when you come across and go down the river. This was a case where these voyagers, a bunch of activists, were trying to bring attention to the river and to improve it. There are about a dozen or 15 of them, took a trip all the way from Franklin, New Hampshire to the Merrimack. The Merrimack's ending in Newburyport. This is State Senator Diana DiZoglio from Methuen. She was one of the voyagers, 4 days on the river, 4 nights, wherever he could find a place to stay. It rained 2 nights. But once they were up in southern New Hampshire, they came around a bend, and here's a herd of cattle. And so this was a very unique photo of our state senator. Dan Groback took the photo. And here in New Hampshire is a boat launch very close to the start of the river. And you can just see what a big role the Merrimack plays. This is Haverhill heading towards Newburyport. And there are many great shots. In my book, which is coming out in March, I'm told, I have numerous photos that were taken by drones. And so this is a photo, an aerial photo, and it's just, remarkable to see the Merrimack Valley and the beautiful Merrimack. And here is Newburyport Harbor. Here's Manchester again. I love this photo, Cashman Park in Newburyport. It is the busiest state launching site in Massachusetts. and hundreds of vessels are launched there each weekend. Here are the voyagers. I mentioned them. They're going through Haverhill, and isn't it remarkable? 117 miles. And I noticed they did not stop for a Big Mac here, although I'm sure they were tired and hungry. But actually, they had camped there last night in Haverhill, and they wanted to get the tide. So they left Haverhill, and they, just went as fast as they could to try to get to Newburyport because they didn't want to face an incoming tide. Here is Lori Trahan, one of the great congresswomen. She's from the Lowell area. She's working for cleaner water and trying to get more money for communities for that low interest loan fund we talked about. Here is Senator Zoglio again. She was responsible with others in getting the Merrimack River District Commission organized in the last year so people can work for a cleaner river. Mayor Donna Holliday of Newburyport has been very helpful. She engineered close to $30 million in improvements to the sewage treatment plant in Newburyport and has been vocal in asking communities upstream like Haverhill, Lawrence, and Lowell to improve their sewage facilities because we're at the end of the line, as she said. And here are some of the voyagers, which I mentioned. Senator Jim Kelcourse is the big guy in the back. Lane Glenn, the president of Northern Essex Community College, is holding a sign. And in my book, I identify all these people, but they had a good time. And again, 4 days on the river, 4 nights trying to find a place to sleep. It was a good deal. Here's Lane Glenn, the president of Northern Essex. Not everybody went through the Whitewater, but he's an adventurous guy. And here's the voyager starting another day. Beautiful shot by Dan Grovick. And the last couple photos we have, I have about a minute left. We still have a lot of pipes going into the river. This is in Newburyport. It's at the end of the boardwalk in Newburyport. This is not sewage going into there, but it's runoff in the streets. And of course, with oil, gas, whatever from our streets, that gets a lot of effluent. And here is a shot in Methuen. Again, this is not sewage coming out, but it is near a water runoff from rain goes in here. But you can see this is an unflattering picture, but I had to use it. It does show that there's some dirty parts still in the river, and we've got to work to make it cleaner. So that is my presentation. That's me, Dyke Hendrickson. I have a book coming out in March, Merrimack, The Resilient River. I look forward to talking with you again. We have this podcast every Tuesday at 2 o'clock, and I look forward to being with you again. And remember, it's been 50 years since the EPA was created. The Clean Water Act was created in 1972, and those are your two takeaways for today. Dyke Hendrickson here. The podcast is Life Along the Merrimack, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.